So I did 2 years at the Nigerian College and took my A-levels in English, Latin, and history. After that, in 1953, I went over to Britain. There's something interesting about my trip to Britain, actually, in 1955. In those days, quite a few boys traveled to Britain to continue their studies. Banjo was the only university available. Now, on the day that we were to fly, quite a number of other boys, I remember 2 boys quite clearly till today, Ladipo Akinkugbe and Mololu Olunloyo, were also going abroad to study. And we got there on the morning of the day we were to fly. We got there and we sat all day, nothing happened. Nothing at all happened. So in the evening we were told to go back home and come back the following morning. So when we got back home, I went to Butemata to stay with my aunt. It was while I was back home that on the radio, we were told of the crash of the BOAC plane in Libya. And it was carrying the Orumolusi of Ijebubo. And well, you can imagine how scared we all were. But the following morning, we turned up again at the airport. And after a little delay, we were asked to board. So we boarded, and we arrived in London. The British Council sent people to meet us at the airport and take us to our temporary hostels before we fanned out to our different destinations. And I stayed at Queen's Gardens near Bayswater Road. So I did my first degree in 4 years, and it did quite well, actually. And then I thought, what am I going to do now on top of this? So I said, well, you know, my father was a teacher. My mother had been a teacher, so I must be a teacher too. So I applied to Leeds University to do the postgraduate certificate in education. But on my way, well, not on my way really, first I went to London to find out what prospects there were for employment in Nigeria. And the Nigeria office was, of course, we were still a colony. So the Nigeria office was being run by British people. And I went in there and I told them what I wanted, and they said, well, do you have your particulars? The graduation had already taken place. And I had my diploma with me, and I showed it, you know, diploma in Glasgow, all written in Latin. And I showed it to the lady, and he said, wait. Disappeared into a room, came back and put a form in front of me and said, I should fill it in. So I said, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be ready for another year. I'm going to Leeds first. And she said, okay, we'll keep in touch with you. And she did. So I went off to Leeds, and a few months later, she wrote to me and said the French government had offered the Nigerian government scholarships for the development of the diplomatic corps of Nigeria, that these people would go to France and study in the University of Besançon. And she asked me, are you interested? And I said, well, don't do me any harm. So I agreed, and off to Besançon I went. And then at the end of all of that, I came back to London, and off to Glasgow, packed my bags, and went to Leeds. Now, after I had done my master's and my postgraduate certificate in education, I then headed for home. Well, the last year, the year that I spent at the University of Leeds was with the scholarship of the Western region. But the 4 years before that had been paid for by my father, who had written an extremely successful book titled A West African Teacher's Handbook, which was sold all over the Commonwealth. I discovered when I went to West Indies, people were asking me about it. So from the royalties he collected from that book, he sent us to Britain to study. So I came back home, and I was disappointed with the kind of reception that I got, because I went to the Ministry of Education to say I was reporting for duty, and they said, okay, hang on a bit. They gave me something to do in the meantime. And I was told, okay, now you are going to a place called Abraka. And I said, but I thought I was being offered a job at the Western region. They said, yes, Abraka was in the Western region. So I went off to Abraka, to this teacher training college, where many of the students were even older than when I was. And one of them was Tony Momo, that I taught there, yes. So I was there, I enjoyed myself. I played tennis every day with my principal, SF Edgar. And then 6 months later, Edgar called me and said, I've received instructions from Ibadan. You have to go on to Ugeli, to the government college in Ugeli, that the English results in Ugeli in the previous year had been terrible, and they want you to go there and see what you can do. Well, luckily, in that year, the first year that I got there, the English results were very good, A's and C's and so on. But then 1963 came around, and there were rumors of the Western region being broken into 2 regions. And Mr. Shofenwa, myself, a certain Mr. Oladende were the 3 Yoruba education officers at Government College Ugeli. And we were told to get ready to go back where we had come from. So they fixed Mr. Shofenwa and myself into Government College Ibadan. I took part in what was going on in Ibadan, drama, Players of the Dawn, the late Bayo Akinola and all that crowd. And I got in touch with the British Council. And one day the director of the British Council in Ibadan came to me and said, you see, the British government and the American government are planning to offer scholarships to people in West Africa to do a master's course in linguistics. And they planned it in such a way that the people who got the scholarships would spend 1 year in Leeds and the other year at University of California at Los Angeles, UCLA. And Mr. Moody, that's the name of the British councilman, asked me if I was interested. I said, of course I am. So, about 2 months later, I came back and he said I'd been chosen. I should get ready. I'd just got married, actually. This is in 1963. So, my wife and I went back to Leeds. And we did the first year there. And she got a job at the Leeds St. James's Hospital, which was the teaching hospital of the University of Leeds. And at the end of my first year, as I was getting ready to go to America, she had to continue working. For one thing, she was expecting our first child. So I went to Los Angeles and did that second year, got my master's in linguistics. And then another bit of good luck. While I was in Los Angeles, one morning I just got a letter from a man called Professor Maxwell, Desmond Maxwell, who was the head of Department of English at the University of Ibadan. And he wrote to me and he said, we've heard from the British Council how very well you have performed at Leeds. Actually, at Leeds, I was one of the only 2 people who got the the certificate with distinction. And the story has spread to Nigeria, to Ibadan. And the head of Department of English wrote to me and said, we are interested in developing the language side of our English program, and we wonder whether you would care to join us. And I couldn't believe it. A prized job at the University of Ibadan just falling on my lap like that. And I wrote back immediately and I said, of course, I'm interested. So he wrote back again and said, well, when you are going back home, let's meet at Victoria Station. So 2 weeks went by, nobody was telling me where I was going to work. So I just went to the University of Ibadan. And I told them that Professor Maxwell had asked me to pick up my letter of appointment. At that time, there were problems at the university. The Vice Chancellor, Professor Dike, and the Registrar, Nathaniel Adamolekun, were at daggers drawn. And Adamolekun had been asked to leave office for a while. So it was his assistant, his deputy, that I found. And when I introduced myself, said, yes, we got the message from Professor Maxwell, but you see, the Western region have written to say, that's our man, you can't touch him. I said, really? Yeah, he said, that's what it is. So I said, okay, wait a minute. So I went, my dad had now left St. Luke's College and was Archdeacon of Aremo. So I went to him and told him my plight. And I told him, I said, well, I'm going to resign from the Ministry of Education. So I went into his study and typed a letter of resignation. Then I took one copy, the original copy really, to the ministry, gave it to the Chief Inspector of Education's secretary to lay on the table of her boss. Then I went to University of Ibadan. And Oduaran was still there. He was the man acting for Adamolekun. And he saw me and I said, well, I'm free. I've resigned from the Ministry of Education. And the man, lovely man, he didn't ask any question. He took my copy of letter of resignation and handed me my letter of appointment. And that was how I got into the University of Ibadan. So I then settled down, moved up the ladder, became senior lecturer, became professor, became dean. And after that, I went away on sabbatical. I went to the West Indies. When I got home, I found a letter, which I had expected, that I should go and resume the headship of the Department of English. So I had taken all my stuff from my personal room to the head of department's room. And I was going through 1 or 2 days after my return, and I was keeping late nights there just to be able to clear the mail. And then one evening, I had a tap on the door. I said, come in. And the fellow came in, and it turned out to be Taye, who was the professor of anesthetics. He had been to Gobi. So he walked in. I said, how did you know I was here? I said, well, for one thing, I saw a car in the car park, and I thought that must be yours. So he came and he said to me, well, actually, I'm coming from your brother's place in Ring Road. I said, what is the matter? He said he had gone to beg me to accept the offer that he had brought. And I said, what is it? Now, Professor Toye, who had been the Deputy Vice Chancellor, had just been appointed Vice Chancellor of Ilorin. And Professor Kolawole, who was this man who'd come, said that they had taken the soundings all over the campus, and they thought I was the one to take it. And I said, but how can that be? The Vice Chancellor had just appointed me. Obviously, he didn't have it in mind that I was coming to be his deputy when he appointed me. And Taye said he was sure that he would be happy if I agreed. I said, are you sure you are not playing Igbobi card here? he said, no. He said, this is the feeling of the whole campus. I said, but what is the feeling of the current Vice Chancellor? He said you could vouch for him. Then he said, okay, I'll make sure that he comes to your house and tells you himself. And he did. The following evening, he just came and set the proper tone as he entered the sitting room. The first thing he said is, where is my beer? So we went and produced cold beer for him, and we chatted. And then he said, Ayo, there's nobody I want to be my deputy but you. And I was completely disarmed. And as I discussed with my wife later on, I said, well, if it got to this point and I still said no, people will say, because we had vied for the Vice Chancellorship together, people will think I was a bad loser. So I said, well, let's give it a try. So that's how I became the Deputy Vice Chancellor. And then Professor Olaide tried to get a second term. They didn't give it to him. So for a brief period, for a year, I acted as Vice Chancellor. And there was a lot of tumult about this because people thought I was acting as Vice Chancellor by virtue of being Deputy Vice Chancellor. And people had started scheming because my term was going to be over. So they wanted to put their favorite there so that he would be the obvious Vice Chancellor. But suddenly again, as these things happen, I got a letter from Gray Lunge, the secretary to the government, the federal government, saying he'd been directed that you, Professor Ayo Banjo, should act in the position of Vice Chancellor until a new Vice Chancellor was appointed. So I was named, not just by virtue of being Deputy Vice Chancellor. So all the stampeding immediately stopped. And then the proper election came, and I got elected as the Vice Chancellor. And I did one term, a bit stormy. The Minister of Education himself was so openly partisan, and we fell out. We used to be friends, and we just fell out completely. To the point that when my term was over, and the council of the university had said that they would recommend me for a second term. Nobody had been recommended for a second term before, but the minister was there in Lagos, didn't want me. So he delayed and delayed and delayed. I started hearing from my friends in Lagos that some of the military people in Babangida's camp had gone to him and said, why is your minister behaving like this? Give him a deadline. Tell him to appoint this man, because we gather he's doing this because the Vice Chancellor is Christian. Anyway, so after a while, Obasanjo stepped in on his own, tried to see the minister. The minister didn't make himself available, and they said he'd gone to Germany. Nothing happened. And suddenly, I got a note from Obasanjo saying that he would be glad if I could come and see him in Ota. And we had an unpleasant discussion because I had to point out that the minister was telling a lie. And Obasanjo said, but what he's saying is not true. So anyway, we finished, and then he said, the minister, he said, well, President Obasanjo, well, you can't intervene in a matter, and we still refuse. So he put his hand in his babariga, brought a letter out and gave it to Obasanjo. Obasanjo read the envelope, my name was on it, so he passed it to me. I opened it, and it was the letter of my reappointment as the second term Vice Chancellor. My successor was Professor Oyedino. And when I turned 60, I wrote to him and I said, I'm retiring. And he wrote back quickly and said, no, they've extended the retirement age now to whether 65 or 70 at that time. I said, well, I know, but I'm going anyway. So that's how I went. And I went to my department. I said I was ready to take up my job. And the head of department, who was very surprised, had been my student, Niyo Shundare. Then Ni came to me and said, can we make you what do they call them now? Not part-time, but no, they would have paid me, if I'd agreed. And I said, no, I can't agree because I had said no to the Vice Chancellor. I can now that I'm going on leave, I cannot go on leave drawing pension and drawing pay from the department. So Niyi said, okay, we know what we'll do. We recommend you to be appointed emeritus professor. And that's how I came to be emeritus professor, and I still taught. At least I taught a few. The problem with the people who came in after the army, is that they are in love with statistics. When we came in, there were 36 primary schools. Now there are 360. And people don't ask them, are they still schools? They are interested in statistics, not in quality assurance. But we have to do something about quality assurance. And the number of secondary schools, for instance, which are, old boys are trying to resuscitate their schools. At Igbobi, we are spending millions on reshaping the whole place. And I know that at Ugeli, they are doing the same. Thank you for making me part of this wonderful adventure. I hope it all comes out very well.